Well, even though I've been here a bunch of times before to Northern California, today I was completely duped by the California microclimates because as you can see, I'm wearing a t-shirt and I got jeans on because when I left my place, it was like 65 and pretty chilly and not that sunny over in Tiburon, right across the mountain here. And then over here in Corte Madera by the creek, it's like 10 degrees warmer, 75, but it still feels fantastic out here. I'm not complaining. I just wish I could have done the traditional shorts and tank top for you guys. But you know what? I'm getting what I asked for. I'm getting the nice cool weather. I don't want it to be much hotter than this anyways, so I'm happy. Now, if anybody's ever heard of the website Motley Fool, they're a pretty big financial website, and they collect all sorts of data, including reports and surveys. And one of the most recent data points that they came out with was pretty extreme because they surveyed 2,000 Americans and 85% of Americans say they will at least occasionally spend money on unnecessary expenses, which is kind of funny considering people don't have a lot of money and everyone complains how broke they are, but somehow you find some cash for stuff you don't really need. And with these survey results, they came out with the 5 top categories that people waste money on, essentially. And the number 1 category is frequently eating out. This is something I have talked about many times here on the channel before. A lot of smart people in the comments have already mentioned that, you know, they cook everything at home now. They don't even go out to eat anymore, and they save a lot of money doing so. And it saves you a lot more than you actually think, because you go to a restaurant and you could end up spending $30, $40, $50 on one meal, whereas if you spent that same amount of money at the grocery store, that could be enough money to feed you for a few days. And I think a lot of people are starting to wisen up to the fact on this one, because you look at what's happening in the fast food industry, and so many of these businesses, particularly McDonald's, are losing a lot of their customers because the value just isn't there anymore. You know, it used to make sense to go and grab that dollar cheeseburger and the dollar fries or the value meal, but the value isn't there that much anymore like it used to be. And of course, there's a lot of health benefits to giving up the fast food lifestyle anyways, so it's not like this is really a bad thing, but this translates across to eating at more expensive restaurants as well, because people are either lazy to cook, they don't know how, or they just prefer to eat out. They like that food better, but it comes at a high price. The second thing that Americans are guilty of wasting their money on is impulse buying from online retailers. I think my wife is a good candidate for this one. She probably does that a lot. She would probably argue with me and say, well, we need a lot of that stuff. But a lot of it's also an impulse buy, right? She's shopping on Amazon or whatever, Target, whatever website she's looking at, and she buys a couple of things that we do need, and then she'll see a few other things like, oh, well, I wasn't thinking about that, but now that you mention it, maybe we need that too. Now, let me just also get something straight here, and for the record, like, it's okay to waste money if you have the money to waste. The big caveat to this is that you need to have disposable income if you want to waste money. But as we know, based on all of the finances we've gone over here on the channel when it comes to Americans' average debt, credit card debt, and the amount of people taking out HELOC loans, all sorts of things like that, the picture is crystal clear that people just don't have the money and they're spending money they don't have. And I don't know this for a fact, but I would be willing to bet and say that this is probably a bigger problem with women when it comes to impulse buying things online or in the store for that matter, things that they don't need, more than it is for men. Like, I've done this a few times before, but I can attest and say that most of the time, or 90% of the time, it's something that I actually needed. It's just something I forgot about maybe, and that's why it was an impulse buy, like, oh yeah, I see that, we do need that too. But the reality is a lot of women love to shop and just can't resist that deal. You know, I was only planning on spending $100 today. I spent $175 because everything was on sale. And you're gonna see a common theme here with these top 5 categories that people waste money on. And unfortunately, so much of it revolves around food, because number 3 is buying convenience food and beverages. Now, this is something I can happily brag and say I never do this. I don't buy any convenience food or beverages. I'm not the person to stop at, you know, the 7-Eleven or the gas station and run in there and grab a drink or one of the quick food items. Not only is all that stuff garbage, but it's also expensive. I don't eat or drink any of that stuff. But a lot of people do. And that goes back to not cooking at home, not being prepared, not having meals ready to go. I'm not about to give a crash course in diet and nutrition on this video, but planning and preparing meals ahead of time can go a long way, guys. Like, I am not a big planner when it comes to preparing meals ahead of time, but what I do is I buy a lot of the food I like to eat and keep it at home and make it so that it's fairly easy to make. Like, my favorite thing to eat is ribeye steak with vegetables. Basically one of the healthiest meals you could possibly eat. I don't eat that every day, but if I have a lot of steaks in the freezer or I have one in the fridge ready to go, it only takes, 5-10 minutes to cook up a steak and some vegetables, and there you go, you have a meal. Not only a meal, but a big filling meal. Sometimes so filling that you can't even eat it all and you have leftovers. I know a lot of people say, well, I'm busy, Michael. I got 2 or 3 kids and we're always on the go. We got to bring them everywhere. So it's easier to just stop somewhere and get something than to go home and make something. And I get that. But you got to understand that not only are you hurting your finances and draining your wallet, but you're also hurting your health and your family's health by doing this. It's kind of like giving your kids cigarettes at a young age. What kind of parents would do that? Probably none. But it's amazing how many parents have no problem going through the McDonald's drive-thru or any other fast food drive-thru and feeding their kids that on a weekly basis, And speaking of leftovers, the fourth thing that Americans waste money on is discarding leftovers or expired food excessively, which means that you're probably just buying too much food or making too much food and not eating it, probably because you made a meal, had leftovers, and then went out to eat the next day. I think we've all done this on occasion. I know I'm guilty. I've done this a few times in my life and just had too much food, had to throw stuff away because it got expired, or you made something a week and a half or 2 weeks ago and it's just no good. It happens. But think about this, so many people complain about where the economy is and the food prices and everything like that, yet all it takes is one dinner invite for somebody to throw away maybe $20 worth of food in their fridge because they went out to dinner. Not only did they spend more on the meal when they went out, but also had to throw away another meal because it just got too old or expired. And as you can tell so far, these are all things that are pretty easy to avoid and can save you literally hundreds of dollars per month if you do avoid them. Now, the fifth thing that Americans waste the most money on is paying for unused TV streaming services. This one I cannot relate to because I only have one streaming service that I actually pay for, which is Max, or HBO Max, whatever you want to call it. The Amazon streaming service is included with the Amazon Prime subscription, but I can definitely see how people can fall into this trap, because the thing is, with all these streaming services these days, it's all about exclusivity. That's how they get you to sign up for their streaming service. It used to just be Netflix back in the day, but all of these movie studios had the brilliant idea that maybe we should start our own streaming service and, make our content exclusive to our streaming service. So that way, if you want to watch anything related to Star Wars, you have to sign up for Disney Plus. If you want to watch this movie right now, you got to sign up for Amazon Prime. If you want to watch another one, you got to have a Starz subscription. You know what I mean? I do pay for the YouTube Premium subscription, which I think is 100% worth it, guys. And for anybody out there, I'm not promoting this. I don't get paid to tell you this or anything, but I have had YouTube Premium for a few years now, and it is like the best thing ever. People who complain about watching ads on YouTube, sign up for YouTube Premium. It's the same cost as a streaming service, and if you watch a lot of YouTube, chances are you probably watch even more YouTube than you watch the streaming. It'll be money well spent. You don't have to watch any ads except for the occasional sponsorship that comes up. So going back to these 5 categories, the major player here, 3 out of the 5 categories revolves around food. People buying food that's expensive or convenient or throwing away food. And food's a tricky one because everybody's relationship with food is different. Food offers convenience sometimes, it offers an impulse. Sometimes you see something and it instantly makes you want to have it, like a craving. Or also sometimes people look at food as a reward, like, okay, I've been good on my diet all week, so I'm going to eat this now, stuff like that. So if you're somebody who falls into some of these traps, there are some things that you can do. one of the biggest things you can do, especially when it comes to impulse buying anything or shopping online, is to take a pause. Add the item to your cart or to your wish list, but then wait a couple days to see if it's something that you still want to purchase. And a lot of times you might find out that it's not really as necessary as you thought, or maybe it's a little more money than you wanted to pay, and can help you put that purchase into perspective that you might have just spent the money on without giving a second thought before. The next thing you can do is you can make spending money more difficult for yourself. In this world of online shopping, everything is an immediate gratification. All you got to do is press the buy now button and it's at your house a day later. But what you can do is you can purposefully make and create more steps for yourself in order to purchase something that make it more difficult. For example, if you go to the store in person, not only do you have to drive there, but you have to actually walk through the aisles and look at things. You got to stand in line to buy it, go through the checkout, all of that stuff, and it will slow you down and help you think a little bit more about your purchase. Unless you're somebody who's a compulsive shopper, then this could end up doing more harm than good, because you might just throw everything in the cart. Like walking through the store, you see even more stuff that you might not have otherwise purchased. So this can definitely be a double-edged sword depending on your personality and what kind of issues you have surrounding shopping. But the third thing that everybody can do to help cut down on any type of wasteful spending is not to have the extra money around to spend to begin with. So if you're somebody that actually is left over with some cash every single month and you're prone to spending it, then you need to force yourself to save it. And the best way to do that is set up an automated investment, whether that means automatically a portion of your paycheck goes directly into a high yield savings account or some sort of investment account, a 401k, anything like that. So if the money automatically hits those accounts before it ever even hits your checking account, it's one of those things where it's out of sight, out of mind, and it will help you not spend the money because you won't see the money in your account and it won't register right away like, yeah, I have this extra cash to spend. But if you're somebody who doesn't have the extra cash to spend and you are still spending anyways, you are really putting yourself in the danger zone when it comes to debt. There is this quote, I don't know who said this or who sent this to me, but I read this recently that said something along the lines of, slavery used to be people in chains, now it's people in debt. So think about that one for a little bit. There is a lot of truth to that statement, and the more I thought about it, the more I agree with it, because when you are in debt to somebody, you are a slave to them until that debt is repaid, and they can take almost everything from you to get that debt repaid. So obviously it's not as brutal or harsh as slavery ever was, but it definitely has a lot of similarities. Just like I was talking about a couple days ago, you have most Americans basically mentally spending their paycheck before they ever even get it. About 94% of people's paychecks are already spent before they even get it, because a lot of that's already allocated towards expenses and the rest of it is spent within the first 3 days of receiving the check. Now, how is that smart? It's not. Now, I came across something else that I thought was fascinating, which is the salary that a single person needs to live comfortably in all 50 US states. And the median annual wage for individuals is just under $62,000 at the end of 2024. Don't mistake that for median household income, which is closer to $80,000 per year. But here's the problem. It actually takes about $80,000 or $81,000 per year for somebody to live a comfortable lifestyle in the cheapest state in America, which is West Virginia. Now, a comfortable lifestyle is being defined as following: that you're following the 50-30-20 budget method, which recommends putting 50% of your income towards essentials like rent and food, 30% towards discretionary spending, and 20% towards debt repayment and savings. And we know that most people don't do this, so it's not really a surprise that a lot of people don't fall into this category, and that's why you need substantially more than what individuals actually make, okay? But if you take a look at this chart here, you can see from the top to bottom all of the different states and how much money a single person, we're talking an individual, would actually need to make per year to live a comfortable lifestyle based on this 50-30-20 rule. And the numbers are astounding. In Hawaii, somebody needs to make 125 grand a year. Here in California, you need to earn about $120,000 a year as an individual to live a comfortable lifestyle. You know, in Florida, it's almost six figures at $97,000 per year. Like, most people don't make anywhere close to these numbers, guys. So when I see this, I feel like, yeah, no wonder so many people are in debt, because so many people are living way above their means. You know, if you're making $62,000 a year, but you're living like you make $85,000 a year, that's a pretty big deficit, and you're basically running your life like the federal government does. The difference is you can't print money and they can. And the worst part about it is every time they do print money, you get poorer. And this is not really a great time to be spending beyond your means with all of the layoffs that are out there. There was so many things that were sent to me over this past week, and I'm just going to kind of go over them briefly here. But retail layoffs, for example, okay, are up 274% in 2025, all right? There's been about 700,000 job cuts since the beginning of this year so far, and we're only 65,000 jobs away from matching the total of all jobs lost in 2024. So we're just barely halfway through the year here, and we've already lost almost the entire amount of jobs that we lost all year last year. Remember, last year was a bad year too. So that just goes to show you that this year is on track to be much worse. And retail is one of those sectors that has seen the largest amount of job losses in 2025, at about 76,000 jobs lost this year from stores like Joann Fabrics and Macy's, you know, these big brands that are closing down hundreds of stores nationwide. You also have other smaller retailers like Rite Aid and Party City. Party City is one that went out of business completely. They're closing down like all 700 locations across the country. And then there's the tech layoffs, and these guys are much luckier when it comes to losing their jobs, because Google just made an announcement that they are going to do a new round of buyouts to its US employees. So they basically offer you money to quit your job, which is a much more generous thing to do than just let you go. And it's something that they do to try to look good in the public eye. And as a big tech company like Google, they of course have the money to do this, whereas a company going out of business like Party City isn't going to be able to do anything like that. And Google was a company that in 2023 laid off 12,000 people, guys. So all these tech companies have been, you know, shedding people like no tomorrow. And at least if you work for a tech company, you might actually get a generous severance package. But you're not so lucky if you work at the Frito-Lay manufacturing plant here in Rancho Cucamonga, California. They've been in business for 50 years, and they just abruptly announced that they're going to be stopping all operations. They didn't disclose exactly how many people are losing their jobs, but it's a couple hundred at least. You have a restaurant in Washington, D.C., very popular Mexican restaurant called Alero, that is closing because the rent is too damn high. The rent is too damn high for everybody, including businesses, and that's exactly what's happening over there. You're seeing businesses getting priced out of their locations and being forced to close their doors because the landlord somehow thinks that there's gold underneath the floor and that location is worth millions. Here's a restaurant that was in business for 20 years and is being forced to close their doors due to greedy landlord. One of the customers of the restaurant said, "Whoever owns the commercial space in this building has faced increasing vacancies for months, leading us to wonder why a lease of a paying tenant was not renewed." You see this all the time. Very poor financial decisions made by these big corporations that own commercial real estate. They kick out great businesses and good paying tenants, and then all of a sudden half of the storefronts are vacant. You see this happen a lot on Lincoln Road in Miami Beach. That's always the perfect example that I can think of where this happens, where I live, because that's supposedly one of the most expensive locations to have any sort of business or retail store, and most of them never make it. They just last for a little while and they're gone. These stores and businesses can't keep up with the sales needed to pay extremely high rents, and so the owners of these retail spaces would rather just keep them vacant than actually have a business in there, which makes no sense. Here's another one that I never heard of before, a brand called Torrid. They are a plus-size fashion retailer that caters to women who are sizes 10 through 30, and they are closing down 180 stores this year. And the first thing I thought of when I read this was the Weight Watchers story that I covered a couple months ago. And I'm just thinking, what, is Ozempic putting this place out of business too now? There's already a lot of rumors swirling around that Ozempic is putting Weight Watchers out of business because people are able to just lose weight very easily with these GLP-1 drugs. And maybe that's the same thing that's going on with the plus size retailers. Who needs all these big clothes if we can just lose weight by injecting ourselves with these drugs? And while all this is going on, there was a report that came out saying that consumer sentiment has been surging now, and for the month of June, at least the preliminary numbers are showing that. And the consumer sentiment index is reportedly jumped 16% to a 60.5 reading in just 1 month, which is something you don't really see. And apparently this is happening because people are starting to get used to the idea that we might have tariffs and things like that. But the reality is a lot of people really haven't felt the negative consequences of what the tariffs could potentially bring, because a lot of them are still on pause. These expenses haven't really filtered through to the average American yet in most areas of their life. So people might be getting too complacent too fast, or people might be thinking that because nothing has happened so far, that nothing will happen, which is also a possibility because there's been all these threats of tariffs. But then once something is actually supposedly done, then the tariff gets paused or canceled or modified or whatever. But make no mistake, consumer sentiment right now is still sitting 20% below where it was just in December of 2024. So things still aren't looking good for the average American right now. So like I was saying, with all of this bad economic news and all of these businesses going under and all these people losing jobs, now is probably not the time to be overspending beyond your means. Now is the time to be hunkering down, getting out of debt, saving and investing your money, and getting ahead of everybody else. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here. And I'll see you in the next one.